Welcome to It's a Simple podcast, where we ask one simple question and have a drink. To my left is Christina Downey, who's going to be moderating. This is John Galeka, and to my right is Matthew Newman.
The one simple question: what's the best piece of advice you have gotten?
Piece of advice?
Advice you have gotten in your career.
Drink.
That is a good piece of advice. I highly condone that as a piece of advice.
And that's our show.
I've had a lot of advice over my life, but the one that resonates the most and I continue to share was I was young in my career, coming up in store operations. So this was before I was in CPG, but I was on the ops side. And I was a second assistant. And my store manager was divorced, alcohol problems, smoked cigarettes. He looked at me and said, "Matt," I won't say the name of the company, but he said, "The company, you don't live for the company. The company helps you live. Keep your priorities straight." And it's sunk in.
Wow, and you're young and it sunk
Yeah.
in. Awesome. So how do you live that?
So work-life balance is a super important piece, right? So like the company helps provide us with how we live and how we vacation and enjoy life. But the primary objective is my faith, my family, and then my career in that priority. So that's how I practice that piece of advice.
Awesome. All right. Anyone else have a?
My head's spinning. I've had so many advice given to me over the years. Don't do this. Don't start a company. Don't go into advertising. Don't.
You ignored all of it and did all those things.
I've ignored pretty much. I've ignored a lot of it. I've gotten lots. I'm trying to think of a specific instance. I think some of the better advice I've been given is don't get comfortable in what you're doing. And the minute you get comfortable is the minute you slow down and create risk for yourself, which has served me very well as a business owner. Because comfort is like, and not that we should all strive for discomfort in our lives, but comfort is, it stops you from changing. It stops you from growing. It stops you from searching for things. And so by not getting comfortable, then it leads you to not get into, to get into to move into uncomfortable situations, which makes you grow and makes you be a better person. So that's some really good advice. I got that from one of my college professors.
Wow.
Well,
Early advice. All right, Brian, any one that sticks out?
What keeps coming up for me is the value of who you're getting advice from. Not really any specific piece of advice, but I think having clear goals and values, and then finding someone who understands those goals and values and embodies them, both personally and professionally, and then finding folks who, have experience doing what you're trying to do. What I've experienced through this founding journey has been, there are so many different bits of advice that you get, and they're all accurate, but they're framed through they're framed based on somebody else's, preconceived biases of what it is that you're trying to accomplish or what they think you should be trying to accomplish. Congruency in decision making is incredibly important. And for me, one of the hardest things that I did was finding out who to listen to. And then once you figure out who to listen to, we talked on the last episode about decision making and like using data for decision making. And I found that when you feel like you have really good people giving you advice, you can kind of outsource really quick and hard decisions, because they're going to be a lot more right than you will be trying to learn something new. Help, folks that help you avoid certain pitfalls. But I think the first thing is you got to figure out who you're taking advice from and why.
Super smart. Now, here's something we've talked about a lot, right? A lot of people are going to give advice. A lot of people are going to give opinions, as you say. What's your quote?
Yeah, I was going to say, so I say two things, right? Advice is assholes and elbows. Everybody's got some, right? So everyone wants to give advice. The other piece of that is advice can always be given, but never has to be taken, right? And that's a big piece, as you're saying, who you listen to and what you derive from that information. But
So how do you filter out good advice from bad advice? Because true, we're in a industry where everyone and I say I love this space, the founder startup space, because so many people are so willing to help you and be like, I had this challenge, let me help you so you don't have this challenge, or hey, you need this resource. Like it's a really welcoming community, but it also is a community that always has advice and always has answers. So how do you filter that out to in what we do?
I think it goes back to what I just said. You find people that share similar values and similar belief systems and understand what you're trying to accomplish professionally and personally. And when you have congruency there, it's really easy to follow, that advice, because you know that, folks are giving you the really, but it's, cleansed through a lens of what your ultimate objective is. Um, so I think that's like a lot of interviewing and a lot of getting to know people, and um, just being human about it, not being transactional, but being more relational about it. About finding like who you're going to seek advice from. You have to be very intentional about it.
so I would say my approach would be a little different. I would take the advice and listen, extract what I value to be factual and actual, or what I could learn from, but then I would seek to validate, right? Through data, through some of the other stuff we've talked about, right? Is it qualitative? Is it quantitative? Is it a gut feel? Like, start to validate some of that decision making and extract the points that I want to learn. But I also like to surround myself with people that are different than I am to provide a different point of view. Because if I surround people that think like me, act like me, walk like me, then we're all going to have group think, and it doesn't goes back to comfort, and then we're complacent, and then we don't challenge each other. So there's this, back to what we talked about in the previous conversation, that it's art and a science, right? Even with this, with getting advice and giving advice.
Yeah, I do that a lot too. At least I try to surround myself with a lot of like type A's and detail orientated people, and people who see the world completely different than I do, because they help me with my blind spots across the board. And when getting advice from those folks, I'm a lot like you. I sort of take the pieces I want, and then I find little ways to validate them, whether that's acting on that advice, whether it's fully act or a controlled environment, or it is, taking that little piece and talking to some other folks I trust in a circle that I've built relationships with over the years. But, a lot of the advice for me, to add one more layer, comes to a relationship, right, over time. And sometimes that, there's people that I've been working with for 20 years that I just trust. Like, I can go to a lot of my friends with a business question, and they'll give me an honest answer, whether I like it or not.
Right.
And I value that more than anything.
Well, that's a really good point, because each of you are pretty high up in your careers and your roles. As you move up, we all know, like, people tend not to disagree with you because you're the owner of the agency, you're the founder of the company, you head up a huge part of the a company, and so people tend to agree with you a lot. And that's not always what you're looking for, but they'll do it. So how do you challenge some of that and go outside of that, like, to get the right advice?
Well, I'll take that. Because I think when I was answering the first question, I was more so thinking from a mentorship standpoint. But I do think, when we brought Matt into the business, do you remember what I asked you to do, like what your primary objective was? To tell me when I'm doing stupid things.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just, it was more of a coach than it was anything else, right?
Yeah.
To observe and advise and
Mhm.
provide you feedback on what I was witnessing and seeing.
So like giving permission is one aspect of it. And I don't necessarily think that because you share aligned values, I think there's a lot of values that we intrinsically share.
Yeah.
But you've got a lot of experience and a lot of gray hairs in that beard. And
Oh, he just called you.
Well, I do though. I do.
Still a good looking beard.
not a call out. It's a great looking beard. It's a great looking beard.
Well, earned gray hairs.
Yeah, exactly.
Well earned gray hairs. And
Some
you know,
teenagers will do that to you.
like you need to be self-reflective and able to be coachable.
Yeah, and to add to that, I would say it's showing that humility and humbleness as a leader, that when somebody does have a difference of opinion, that you address it and you accept it, right? And when you show that outwardly, then that empowers others to feel that confidence to say, wait, I'm allowed, I'm valued to provide a different point of view. And it's, even if you don't agree with it as a leader, like you take it, you absorb it, validate their opinion, and then, move on from there. But it allows that space to allow people to be open and candid. And it comes to culture, right? Within an organization. And people that talk about culture don't have it. People that don't talk about culture, it's there, right? Like we could just openly make things happen and disagree. We talk about values and we talk about our goals,
Yep.
but we don't preach what our culture is outwardly to anyone else, right? We just live it. And that's a big piece of it. It starts at the top and it has to transcend down. And I think you as the CEO and founder, you've set that expectation. And we've been through some challenging times. We've been through change. We've been through people leaving, and it's still kept the root of the business and that openness. And that's, the story, but the reason I'm here is I was sitting in the room with the new staff, recognizing what was happening. And it just said, yes, I'm in. I'm in. I'm ready to be more than just a coach to Brian. And that's what brought me in, was that willingness to just, and it was open. Every level within the organization was able to share what they were thinking and feeling.
Yeah. And I think just as important as finding the right person to give advice, you need to be willing to take advice, because having been in the advice giving position, one of the most frustrating things is when you give gold.
You drop little.
Don't you always
Yeah,
get gold?
absolute gold. And people don't take the advice. And so at least what I've endeavored to do, and I think it's very important. Like I think as you're collecting data and feedback, especially from different viewpoints, like asking different people different questions and understanding different perspectives, really important. But from like a pure advisory standpoint, like just a few people, you keep it small, because you want to be able to take action on the advice. There'll be a lot of different conflicting views. You can't take action. And if somebody is not feeling validated in the feedback they're getting, then they're probably going to stop giving advice, right? And I think it's super validating when someone gives you, okay, here are the 5 things to do, and then you go knock it out. Fucking great. What's next? And then you grow. So I think that's important also.
Awesome. So what's the worst piece of advice you've gotten? And I'm sure we've all gotten some really bad advice.
From a business perspective, I've gotten the advice to, one of the things is like hire slow, and take your time with people, bring them in, look. And I've actually found that, hiring, faster and hiring ahead has served me better. And maybe it's the business I'm in across the board, but, just trusting my gut on people, on what I see across the board, hiring real fast. And then, if something doesn't work out, taking a few reasonable steps to make sure it works out. But I tend to do the opposite of, what folks say. I don't know if that's always a bad thing, because you gotta ask the why behind it and why they're doing it. And they have advice has a lot of different context behind it.
Yes.
So when it comes to, like, there's a lot of good reasons people hire. So they've been burned, they've not asked the right questions in interviews, they've hired on a resume versus a mindset and a personality, on, all these things that drive bad decisions, or bad decisions for me at the time. So that's one piece of advice I haven't taken that's served me well.
Awesome. Anyone else who's gotten some bad advice?
I think mine's more of a reflection of a mindset that I chose not to follow. Maybe it was subconscious advice, but not direct. And I've been in the industry a long time and had lots of different leaders. The advice or mindset that I chose not to follow was a leader that demanded respect instead of commanded respect. And so, you're put in positions of leadership and management, and there's a difference between the two. And watching people that have gotten to levels of organizational structure and leadership that basically demanded respect instead of earning the respect. And so that was an obvious thing for me, and I struggled working for leaders like that. And those were just jobs, right? They were just jobs that they weren't a career. They want to focus. I'm like, I'm going to do my duty. I'm going to do my 18 months. I'm going to check the box, and I'm moving on from this person. So I purposely said, that's not who I'm going to be as an individual and as a leader. So not direct advice, subconscious, indirect advice, right?
I love that.
Yeah, you can learn from, I was told once you can learn as much, if not more, from bad managers as good managers, right? Because you see who you don't want to be and
Right.
what the effects of a bad manager is. Yeah. How about you, Brian?
Nothing's really coming to mind.
Really? Nothing? You've not been given bad advice? I got told once early in my career to be quiet.
To be quiet.
To be quiet. Yep. Just listen. And I followed that advice for a bit, and then I could see it wasn't serving me well. So speaking up in meetings, I'm from a different era. Let's just say that, and I've been dismissed from meetings because I was a female and they were going to use bad words and they wouldn't like all those things. But yeah, it was like just sit and listen, and then you're not contributing. And I quickly realized that by watching and observing, the people who were contributing were getting noticed and moving up and doing more, so
That's interesting because I do advise people listen first,
yes, but then speak
then
up.
respond, right?
But then respond
Yeah.
is the right.
Yeah.
I was told just to be in the meeting and be quiet. I was a junior, as like a double AE.
Yeah. I think there's been meetings where we have been on Slack and you're like, you're awfully quiet.
Yeah.
My response is, I'm just listening.
Yeah.
Right?
Early in my career, I remember being in meetings and I would talk a lot. My perspective was if I'm in the meeting, I should be saying something. I should give my perspective. I should have an opinion, whatever it is. And I got similar advice that it wasn't be quiet. It was, you're in this meeting to learn how a meeting is conducted, not to give input at this point.
That's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
different things. I mean, I did have I grew up in the agency world, and that means clients are paying for me to be at the agency. And I had one manager, if you didn't speak within a 10-minute, you would get a note and say, you need to dismiss yourself. You're no longer required.
Mm.
And it was a big ding.
Was that good advice or bad advice?
I think it's a bit of both, actually. I agree with the listen and then speak. There were the people who would just listen and then sum up the meeting, and somehow they look brilliant. But
That
You-
trick. That drives me.
you know that trick, right?
I've
this-
done it. Yes.
There's always one. So what I think we're saying here is, I didn't hear you saying anything, but I do think, when you're on the service end of things, the clients are paying an hourly wage for most part. I mean, some have retainers, and so you want their contribution. And I think I think when you're more junior, you're afraid to speak up because of that. You've been told by different people and, you see all that. And no, like, actually, I want to hear what everyone says. And then particularly some of the junior people, because that may be our target. That's who we're looking at. They haven't done this 20 times. They haven't been jaded. They're going to come at it from a different perspective. So I absolutely, as a client, want to hear them speak up. Like, I value that. And I like to be challenged. Some people know that about me. I like to be challenged because otherwise, how are you going to grow? One of the advice I give is, I always say, like, if you see a chart and it's, and you have someone who's thinking like this, it's just going to stay in that plane. If you have someone who thinks like this, it hits it and it just pushes it up. And so you need that. Like, you need someone to, even if they're just trying to get you to think differently in a different perspective, to shake you out of it. So I think junior people need to speak up and not, yes, listen, but also have a voice. I don't think that was some of the best advice I got.
I agree with you. Yeah, I don't know that I've really, like, I'm really racking my brain, like, have I got bad advice? And I keep coming to, there might have been advice I didn't take. Contextually, maybe the advice was a little bit off, but I think all the advice I've gotten has been coming from a good place for the most part.
Yeah, and some of it, and I'm not saying, the worst advice isn't coming from a good place, but sometimes people give advice and they don't know your business and they don't know all
Sure.
the input. So they're seeing things from an outside perspective. They don't know where you're going to or what's been done. And so they'll offer advice, and I do this, of course, myself or with my kids, right? Based on your own set of experiences,
Right.
how you went through something. Doesn't mean that's how someone else or a company is going through it. So you think you're giving great advice, but I think you mentioned it. You don't have all the data.
So is there such a thing as bad advice, or is there just advice out of context?
That's a great question.
Good.
Advice out of context, I
Yeah.
guess, would be bad advice. It would
I mean, if you take it.
if you take it. No, I mean, it'd be bad
Yeah.
advice in general. If you, as the advice giver,
Yes.
are not taking the time to fully understand the context before giving advice, then you've given bad advice. If I've given you bad context and you've given me advice based on the context I've delivered, you've given good advice that I shouldn't take.
Or bad advice.
Wow.
So which came first, the bad advice
Yeah.
or the bad context? How does that go?
It depends on who, yeah.
Yeah, it depends on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and who's setting the stage for who's supposed to be doing what? Like if I'm a mentor, right, my job is one to listen and then ask open-ended questions or leading questions to try to figure out what direction am I looking to lead this individual. And sometimes, like we talked at lunch, like sometimes you just need to vent. And as a mentor, sometimes that's your role, is not to give advice.
It's not to give advice.
It's just
right?
to sit there and listen, right? And so it's
sometimes you-
understanding the context in which you're supposed to be
Sometimes
doing.
giving advice is bad advice.
Oh, sometimes as a mentor, people just talk and talk and talk. You're like, thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that story. It was
Yeah.
wonderful.
So one,
Our
Oh,
time's up.
was it my time to share?
well, so one thing I have
Sweet.
I have learned actually by my wife, who is not in the industry, has said you need to ask people if they're open to feedback before you just give it. And so now I've practiced this, and it, like when I first put it into practice, was amazing. Had a meeting, somebody presented not well, and I was ready to just coach, right? And I said, "Hey, are you open to feedback from today?" And they were like,
Here's the thing. Nobody,
"Holy cow! Wait,
What is no one's gonna say no
No,
though.
yeah,
no-
yes. It
very,
happened.
very rarely, I think, will someone say no. But I was literally going
In
through
their
this
head
thought
they're
process.
saying no,
They-
but they're just
No, I think it's the opposite. I think very rarely are they going to say no, but if they say yes, it at least opens the door so you know it's coming. So
Right.
it's softening the blow, and you can be aware that it's going to be constructive as opposed to it being backhanded.
Yeah.
If
So
someone says they're open, are you open to feedback? You know it's gonna be negative though.
so I asked this individual. I said, "Are you open to feedback from today's meeting?" And he's like,
Constructive or destructive?
I didn't go there. And he said, "No one has ever asked me that question." I'm like, "Well, the question is intentional. Like, if you're open to feedback, then we'll provide, and I'll give you some feedback on how the meeting went. If you're not, we'll schedule time tomorrow, right? And let you process how the meeting went, and then we'll discuss post." And it set the tone that, like, this is meant to be a two-way conversation. It's not I'm coming down on you as your boss. This is what happened.
Yeah, and there's intent behind
Right.
it then. The intent is to help grow the person
Correct.
versus critique them and make them feel small. It's to be like, hey, that was really like I want to push you up and move you forward.
Well, if you're giving advice, can you actually be can you be trying to put somebody down at the same time and give advice,
So,
Backhanded advice.
I was gonna say at
or is that
Craft,
just letting anger out?
at Craft it was called PQP, right? So you praised,
Uh-huh.
you questioned, and then you polished.
Mhm.
Also lovingly known as a shit sandwich.
Yeah.
Bread, shit, sandwich, right?
yeah.
Make the whole thing work. So, but that's the way it works. You set them up, you tell them what they did well, then you question why they did certain things, and then you polish the coach to get them to the next level.
And that's how we give critique on any concepts.
First of all, John, great job on everything you did. Really appreciate you presenting.
Yeah. And
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 There's
there are
just-
a few things that could use some work,
Yeah.
I think you can polish them.
The worst is when you have to find the positive.
but I feel confident we're going to get there.
All right, I'm gonna take this as a good. I'm gonna take this as a good pause on this topic, to say, hey, I think a lot of what we've talked about today is around advice. Is really it's not about the advice given, but your willingness and openness and to receive the advice, process it through what you know about yourself, your company, the brand, and put that into action.
Fair.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah.
Agreed.
All right. Stay with us for the next podcast and put any cues in the comments. Thanks. And it's that simple.